Internet. Welcome back to Cinema Brawls. I am Daniel.
I am Matt.
And I am Jake, for the time being.
We'll let you know when that changes.
We're doing a couple of horror movies today. Matt, what are they?
The movies that we will be brawling about today are Jason X and Cabin in the Woods.
So, Cabin in the Woods is by far my favorite horror movie. So I will, by all accounts, be biased on this. Let me give you a few statistics, or informations, if you will, about Cabin in the Woods. It was released in 2011. Stars Chris Hemsworth, obviously, Anne Hutchinson, Fran Kranz. I never bothered to learn his name, but he's great. Best part of that movie by far. Oh, and Bradley Whitford is in it, so that's cool. You might know him from a few other things like Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Jake's dad. It was written by Joss Whedon and directed by Drew Goddard.
Was it written by Joss Whedon?
It was written by Joss Whedon.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, he does good stuff.
He does
great stuff.
He does do good stuff.
For sure.
Jason X came out in 2001, is directed by James Isaac, and stars Kane Hodder and David Cronenberg. Yes, that's right. The David Cronenberg is in this movie. I think that's a good thing. And my impression is that it's bad, but I had fun with it, and I want to talk about it.
That's surprisingly an old movie. That's weird.
What do you mean surprisingly an old movie?
For 2001, it's like the 10th Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that would have meant
That's insane that they put out that many Friday the 13th in such a short span.
Dude, they had one coming out like every 2 years.
Well, yes, by
It was
that time frame, it would be about every 2 years. What do you do the math on?
Well, that would make the first Friday the 13th in like the 60s.
No, it would put it 1980.
There were like a couple of them that came out like
10 movies
every
in
year.
20 years.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
There you go.
Math. Your first impressions, Jake?
Well, my first impression is check out this dope shirt that I'm wearing. That's right. This is the first Cinema Brawls shirt, and I won it because I know my friends better than they know me. And I knew what we were going to pick on the bracket from the last few episodes. So I'm now wearing it, showing it off, and it's actually quite comfortable. And it looks pretty dang good if I do say so.
You look dang good, Jake.
Don't I always? But those are not my first impressions on the movie. First impressions on the movie are Cabin in the Woods is a parody of horror movies, or of the horror movie genre. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Whereas Jason X
Is the thing they're parodying.
is a parody of a parody on top of a satire. It's a horror slasher
That
in
takes itself
space.
seriously.
That takes itself seriously. And so, I mean, I'm going to root for Cabin in the Woods because I feel like a lot more thought was put into it, but, you know, Jason X is a movie.
Very good. My first impressions are much of the same. Unfortunately, this might not be a terribly long episode because, well, Jason X was just kind of bad. And there was a lot more thought put into Cabin in the Woods, and Jake was inherently against talking about Jason X in the first place.
It shouldn't have been in the bowl.
I think it's great.
I think we're going to get a cinema knockout today. Third one in a row, which is interesting, but it's getting kind of monotonous.
It's the will of the bowl.
It is the will of the bowl. Despite all of that, I want to take the time to talk about how great Cabin in the Woods is a little bit more freely. And I think we'll get the opportunity to do that.
It is a great movie.
My first impressions. I freaking love Cabin in the Woods. I think it's fantastic.
Daniel.
I agree with all of them. However, I do believe that Jason X is important for film, and I think that it's interesting to talk about, and I think that it's something that merits discussion. And the point of the show is to have that discussion, so let's talk about it. Let's do it.
Sure. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. On your mark, get set, brawl. See what I did there?
They went so quick that I'm pretty sure you flipped me off under the table. The story of both of these is by, generally summed up, kids get killed by things. However,
Some of it, yeah.
When we take a turn at the end of Cabin in the Woods, and it goes from typical slasher movie, to something much more interesting. And that is definitely a turn that I don't think anybody saw coming. Simply because of that, underlying theme in Cabin in the Woods of, sacrifices to gods, and like how horror movie, slasher things have just become some big like corporate ritual somehow.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting the way they pulled that off.
I totally agree with you. Like you said, it's kind of like a satire or a parody of all those horror cliches. Like, oh, why do the main characters make such bad decisions? How do the monsters always know where to find them? And how come they can never escape? And all of those questions are answered because of this random side story of this government program making it that way.
Oh, yeah.
In order to appease a giant titan god thing that will destroy the world if they don't.
Yeah, right.
That's interesting. That's
awesome.
great.
And they threw in a ton of jokes about that specific thing. Like when the hatch to the basement flies open, and one of the kids turns around and goes, "Must have been the wind."
So, real quick, just some interesting stuff about Cabin in the Woods while we're on there. The guy who plays the stoner, Franz Ferdinand, in the film. So the movie was made before Thor. So, like, they filmed this before Chris Hemsworth was a big actor. But they couldn't find distribution for it. And so it was just kind of sitting there for a while until he did Thor. And so then, of course, the movie comes out, and it was released after. I mean, when they're going swimming, you have Chris Hemsworth and the other football dude, and they're just ripped. But the guy who was the stoner, he doesn't go swimming and stuff, and originally in the script he was. But the reason why he didn't is because that actor was actually in better shape than Chris Hemsworth, and they didn't want to, like, show that off. And, like, so he was just wearing baggy clothing and stuff like that. But, yeah, no, he was just ripped.
That's pretty
How do you
funny.
feel the story of Jason X compares?
So let me break down Jason X for you. Boom. Crash cut. We are in a military installation base. Jason is tied up with chains in the middle of this huge room with cameras all over him. What could possibly go wrong? Well, one, there is a doctor who thinks that he can harness the power of Jason for life-saving things. But then this general comes in and is like, this is my military base and we're going to use him for war stuff. And so then they go to try to get Jason. Where's Jason? Well, he follows the female scientist, killing several people in the process, down into the cryo-freeze chamber. And she tricks him into getting into the cryo-freeze thing and starts to freeze him. But with his magic machete, he's able to stab through it into her. Then, cut to 400 years later, the Earth is completely destroyed, but on a school field trip, college students come to Earth. When they get there, they find the scientist lady and Jason. Thinking that they're just like normal artifacts or whatever, they take them back onto their ship, which looks awfully like Star Trek The Next Generation. I don't know if that's a coincidence. It's not. Where they thaw the scientist lady and then use nanomachines to bring her back to life. She freaks out and tells them, you shouldn't bring back Jason. But the problem is they were thawing him out and he didn't have like a heartbeat or anything like that. So they're just like, oh, he's dead, whatever. But no, he's Jason. He comes back and starts killing people. Then the robot lady comes out and starts shooting him dead. When he is finally dead, they accidentally hit the table that has nanomachines on it and heals him and turns him into Mecha Jason.
Oh, gosh.
And then Mecha Jason goes around and starts killing even more people. But while he is Mecha Jason and they're trying to escape, they lure him into the hologram room and make a hologram of the original Crystal Lake set thing and have teenagers. He takes the time to go kill those holograms of teenagers in a very similar way to how he killed people in previous movies, just for the fun of it while they're trying to escape. And then the dude from 300 comes at him in space and pushes him into the atmosphere of a planet that they're orbiting, and he burns up. Supposedly his mask does not, and is left as a teaser.
So what you're telling me here is they made another Friday the 13th movie just on a spaceship. They even had the gall to have a space college field trip on a space school bus go to Earth just so that Jason could go kill more people.
Absolutely, that's what Jason does. That's his whole shtick.
Would you say that this movie is one of those so bad that it's, hilarious type movies?
Absolutely not. It's just bad.
It's just bad. It's just bad.
There were several parts where I almost turned it off just because I was like, this is boring and bad. This is the most different of the Friday the 13th movies.
I'll give you that. But in terms of the story, I don't think it even kind of compares to Cabin in the Woods.
No.
So something else I really liked about Cabin in the Woods was there was a lot of background lore that the movie doesn't go into. First time I watched Cabin in the Woods, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I was looking up something about it online. And then I went down this rabbit hole of Wikipedia that went into every single artifact in the cellar and tied it to a monster that shows up in the breakout scene. I would love a Cabin in the Woods miniseries of just different people going in every year when they have to do the sacrifice thing and showing different monster scenarios. I think that would just be awesome.
It could be like a flip of the Scooby-Doo thing where it's the monster of the week, but there's also the band of kids of the week.
Right, because it's implied that up until this Cabin in the Woods movie, every other one has been successful, so new kids, new monster.
All right, well, I'm voting for Cabin in the Woods. It's got
also
a better story all around. It was better written and people put thought into it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay. Characters. Why don't we start off with Jason X's characters?
So there's the dude from 300. And now what's in Cabin in the Woods?
cool.
Well, in Cabin in the Woods, you've got the group of 4 kids. Let's go with the 2 main guys working down in the controlling department. And then, of course, I'm going to throw in all the monsters. Because the monsters were, in fact, dope.
I'm kind of neutral, honestly, with characters. Well, I mean, to me, the obvious winner is still Cabin in the Woods. But see, the kids are all incredibly generic, but I have a feeling that they're supposed to be.
They are. And the only one who's not is Marty.
They, started out super generic, but then, just these little bits and pieces unfolded.
They came into their own later after, the movie revealed this is not just a normal slasher movie. That's
right.
when the characters could finally break out and be not just stereotypical horror characters.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth's character, they mentioned he's not there as an athlete. He's on an academic scholarship. And, the first scene he's in, he talks about helping the girl with her philosophy homework.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Where she's not wearing pants, and so you didn't notice.
Yeah, that's true.
I noticed.
No, you didn't.
Every character in there was supposed to fit a stereotype where technically they didn't really.
Jason is the most recognizable character, but it's is he still even Jason? It's they could throw anybody behind the mask and just yeah, that's probably Jason.
Jason's just
It's an idea.
soulless killing robot. Like I said, at the very least, the Cabin in the Woods had Marty as an interesting, fun character.
Wait! There's also David Cronenberg. Continue.
Oh, right.
Right. Whereas I feel like Jason X did not.
I just feel the only thing worthwhile in Jason X is Jason. Let's make
I'm defending
decisions.
Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the
Cabin
Woods.
in the Woods. Great.
Cool.
Rewatchability. How many times have you rewatched Jason X?
I've only seen it once.
Right. Me too.
Same.
I've watched Cabin in the Woods since I discovered it about 2 years ago. at least 4 times.
At least 4.
I've also only seen that one once.
I also
Not that I
recommend it.
wouldn't.
No, I also recommend it to a lot of my friends.
Oh yeah, like that's one of the movies that you go up to people like, dude, you need to see this.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the reason I watched it the first time.
Yeah, Daniel showed me the movie the first time, so.
I'm not saying this is a bad thing and that it ruins Cabin in the Woods, but it has a really interesting, like, the backstory with the government agents and the behind-the-scenes controls. When you discover that the first time, it's like, whoa, cool. But then the other times you're expecting it, and I feel like it might lose its impact a little.
It does.
Not that it's
subsequent
not.
rewatchings, but I mean everything does after like 6 times. So you know.
It doesn't mean it's not fun to watch.
Oh yeah,
still.
no, it's
I
so
would
fun.
probably actually disagree with that statement and the fact that the first time I watched it, I was very confused about what was happening. And the second time and third and everything after that, it was like I knew what was happening, so I could put the pieces together as I watched it, and it made it better for me. Actually,
I can
I can see that. Yeah. Anyway, Cabin in the Woods.
So Cabin in the Woods.
Now merits and genre.
But with Jason, the only thing that they have going for him is, like the entire series, is imaginative kills. That's the only thing they got going for him. And it's kind of funny to see, because I watched every single Friday the 13th movie except for the remake. And, like, as the movies go, they start taking themselves less seriously. And just think of more crazy things to happen. And the reason why I like Jason X is because that's the logical conclusion. I felt like Jason X is a natural progression of just that imagination. Like, how far can we stretch this character?
Sure, but I feel like stuff like that doesn't need to exist.
I feel like,
honestly, sequels that go past like a certain number get ridiculous. Why did they let it get to that point where they're not even taking themselves seriously?
Well, it goes off what Daniel was just saying. Like, the first Friday the 13th movie was just kind of a low-hanging fruit off of the success of Halloween. And they're like, oh, shoot, well, this actually did well. Let's keep picking those fruit.
Right, but that's what I hate about so many movies is people are like, it's low-hanging fruit. We didn't need Jason 4 to whatever it is now. We didn't need Shrek 3. We didn't need a whole bunch of sequels that got made. And I think it kind of ruins the movies that come before it.
they were making money. And
Sure.
so, yeah, if they're going to keep making money, let's keep making the movies. But let's do something different.
So we've talked a lot about Jason X, and I guess it's kind of somewhat worth. This is honestly the closest Jason X will get to having a point, but it still will lose to Cabin in the Woods because it did so much more for the horror genre by not being a straight horror movie than Jason X will by being an actual horror movie.
Yeah, I can't think of a better horror parody than Cabin in the Woods.
Right. And it just elevates the entire horror genre by, like, standing in the back and making fun of it. Like, ha,
Right.
This is weird.
And like I said, it may not be the best horror movie in the public's eye for sure, but it's definitely my favorite.
I think you've explained really well Jason X, and I think I have a little bit more appreciation for it. Not much, but more.
There wasn't much less he could have.
That's true. So good job. But merits and genre is still going to Cabin in the Woods.
100%.
This is where I make my stand. I think that Jason X should win merits and genre for this round. That has my vote.
You're still outvoted, but good job. Good try anyway.
No.
Stand made.
Congratulations.
Emotional impact. Simply put, Cabin in the Woods had a lot more sense of adventure and intensity that I was a lot more invested in.
I couldn't have said that better myself.
Yeah. I like Cabin in the Woods, and that wins my emotional impact.
Well, that is a cinema knockout.
Good job, Cabin in the Woods.
Who would have saw it coming?
We all did.
We all did.
We all did.
We literally all did.
I tried. I really tried.
And
It's hard sometimes.
you know what? I'm kind of glad Jason X is kind of out of the way Now we won't have to worry about it going up against anything else.
Yeah.
Imagine if we did Jason X versus like Schindler List or something. Okay.
All right,
At least it was like they were okay.
My challenge to you is to come up with a movie that could have actually stood a chance with Jason X.
This is going to be an interesting one.
What do you got, Jake?
Blindside.
It's a 7 in.
Huh?
That'll be interesting. That'll be an interesting one. I don't know what I'm going to vote for, honestly, right
I
off
know
the bat.
exactly what I'm gonna vote for.
Really? Yeah, actually, I'm not surprised by that. No, I really like both of those movies.
Tune in next time where we talk about The Blind Side versus Seven.
Blindside the one with Sandra Bullock?
Yeah.
Bye. Daniel, cut out any mention of nipples in this video when Mom watches these.
I love how you have to say that to yourself, too.
Oh, else I'm gonna forget.